Most players think poker is about cards. It is not. It is about how you think under pressure. And most people are wired to fail at exactly that without ever realizing why. You can study ranges for a year. You can memorize solver outputs. You can understand the theory at a level that would impress anyone in a poker conversation. And then you sit down at a table. A bad beat hits. Someone 3-bets you twice in a row. And everything. Because the part of your brain that runs decisions under pressure does not care about what you know. It cares about what you have practiced. About the automatic patterns that fire before your conscious mind even realizes a decision is being made. The difference between a player who understands poker and a player who actually wins at poker is behavioral. Not intellectual, not informational. Behavioral. It lives in what they do automatically, consistently, without effort, in the moments when the pressure is highest and the margin for error is smallest. This video is 11 behaviors, not concepts, not theories, not things to think about tomorrow. Behaviors, things you can start doing differently in your very next session that will immediately change the quality of your decisions. Some of them are counterintuitive. Some of them will feel uncomfortable. All of them are real. Stay until the end, because the last behavior is the one that makes every other behavior possible, and most players never develop it. The first behavior is thinking in ranges instead of hands. It is first because it is the foundational shift that every other improvement depends on. Here is the problem. When you look at your cards, your brain wants to know one thing. What do you have? And almost instantly, it wants to answer a second question. What does your opponent have? These feel like analytical questions. They are not. They are pattern-matching shortcuts. Your brain collapses complex uncertainty into a single answer so it can act. You convince yourself that your opponent has something specific, and then you play against that specific thing, rather than against the actual reality of the situation. And here is what that costs you. Every time you convince yourself that someone has a specific hand and play accordingly, you are making a decision that is optimal for one scenario and wrong for all others. If you are right, you look brilliant. If you are wrong, and you are wrong far more often than you feel like you are, you have made an incorrect decision that you then rationalize with great creativity. Here is how to develop range thinking as a behavior. Before you act on any significant decision, force yourself to articulate a range. Not one hand. A range. What hands would this player have taken this line with? How wide or narrow is that range based on their position, their tendencies, the action so far? What percentage of that range do you beat? The process takes 10 to 15 seconds. Most players never do it. The ones who do make consistently better decisions, regardless of whether they are right about any specific hand. The hand you put someone on is a story your brain tells you to manage uncertainty. The range they actually have is the truth you need to manage correctly. The second behavior is detaching from results. And this is the one that every player nods at, and almost none of them actually practice. Here is the reality. Your brain is wired to evaluate quality by outcome. This is how you learned everything as a child. You touched the hot stove. You felt pain. You learned. The feedback loop was immediate, reliable, and direct. This wiring is deeply efficient for most of life. At the poker table, it is catastrophically wrong, because poker is a game where correct decisions produce bad outcomes all the time, and incorrect decisions produce good outcomes all the time. The feedback loop is broken, not occasionally, structurally. Picture this. You have been running bad for 3 sessions. Every significant call you make seems to hit a wall. You start second-guessing reads. Are solid. You tighten up in spots where you should be aggressive. You play smaller because the last 3 times you played big, it went wrong. Your decisions are now being shaped by results from 3 sessions ago, not by what the current hand actually calls for. The bad outcomes contaminated the decision-making process, and you cannot feel it happening. This is what a broken feedback loop does to a player over time. Detaching from results is a specific behavioral practice. After every significant hand, win or lose, ask one question. Was the decision correct given the information available? Not was the outcome good. Was the decision correct? If yes, you executed well, regardless of result. No, you have something to fix, regardless of result. The result is noise. The decision is signal. Train yourself to evaluate signal, not noise, and watch how differently you approach the very next session. The third behavior is slowing down decisions. Not all decisions, the ones that matter. Most players have a specific and expensive tendency. They make their big decisions at the speed of their small decisions. They act on river shoves in the same elapsed time they fold 72 offsuit preflop. They call 3 bets with the same tempo they post the big blind. The speed of the decision is decoupled from the complexity of the decision, and that decoupling produces errors in direct proportion to the stakes involved. Here is why this happens. Fast decisions feel confident. Slow decisions feel uncertain. Most players are subtly optimizing for the feeling of confidence rather than the reality of good thinking. When you act quickly on a complex decision, you signal to yourself that you knew the answer. You take time. You feel like you are advertising confusion. Both perceptions are wrong, and the behavior that follows them is expensive. The behavior to develop is deliberate pacing. For any decision involving a meaningful fraction of your stack, any bet that changes the trajectory of the session, any call that risks significant chips, any fold that costs you a pot you have been invested in, pause before acting. Not to stall, to think. Specifically, what are the 2 or 3 best options here, and what is the case for each one? This exercise, done in 30 seconds, will frequently surface an option you had not considered, a read you had not integrated, or a factor you had processed emotionally rather than analytically. The best players in the world are not faster than average players. They are slower on the hands that matter. Before we go deeper, I need to pause here, because what I am about to describe connects to something most players experience but never name. You have been playing, maybe for a long time, and there is a pattern in how your sessions go. A pattern that feels like bad luck but happens with a consistency that bad luck does not explain. You make decisions that feel right in the moment and wrong in retrospect. You understand concepts in theory that seem to dissolve the moment real pressure arrives. You lose money to situations you feel like you should be able to handle. That pattern has a cause, and the cause is not the absence of knowledge. It is the absence of a structured behavioral system. A framework that connects what you know to what you actually do when the pressure is real. If you are ready to close that gap, The Mind of a Grinder Complete System is 10 books built specifically for this, not theory disconnected from application. Concrete behavioral frameworks that change what you do automatically, at the table, in the moments that matter most. The complete system is $29.90 this week only. After this launch window closes, the individual books each cost that separately. The link is in the pinned comment. If the first 3 behaviors in this video have already shown you something real about how you play, the system will show you everything else. Now let us keep going. The 4th behavior is understanding incentives, yours and your opponent's. This is almost never discussed in poker education, and it is one of the most powerful lenses available for reading situations correctly. Every player at a poker table is not just playing poker. They are satisfying a complex set of needs. Needs that are often unconscious but always operational. Some players need to feel respected. They are playing for status, not profit. When they feel disrespected, they play irrationally. When they feel validated, they play looser. Some players are there to gamble. They do not want to fold. They want to play big pots and feel the variance. Some players are in risk management mode. They are scared of losing. They fold too much. They can be exploited by aggression regardless of hand strength. None of this is about traditional reads. It is about understanding the motivational structure of the person across from you. Why are they here? What does this game mean to them? What outcomes are they actually optimizing for? Once you can answer these questions, even approximately, you know things about how they will behave under pressure that no range chart will ever tell you. The behavioral practice is observation before engagement. In the first 20 minutes at any table, your primary task is not to play. It is to collect data about incentives. Who is here to gamble? Who is here to prove something? Who has no emotional investment in any individual pot and is simply grinding edge? These profiles determine how each player behaves in the moments where it matters most. Your opponents are not just playing hands. They are satisfying needs. Know the needs, and you know the hands that follow. The 5th behavior is respecting position. Not understanding it, respecting it. The difference matters more than most players realize. Most players who have been around poker for any time understand, intellectually, that position is important. They know acting last is better. They know they see more information when they act after their opponents. But knowing this does not change behavior. Respecting it does. Here is what respecting position looks like in practice. It looks like folding hands out of position that you would confidently play in position. It looks like widening your range significantly from the button and narrowing it significantly from under the gun. Not as an abstract principle, but as a specific, enforced discipline, even when the hand looks attractive and the temptation is strong. It looks like recognizing mid-hand when you have lost the positional advantage you started with and pulling back accordingly. The most expensive habitual leak at most tables below the highest levels is playing too many hands out of position. Players who would fold a marginal hand from early position if they were thinking clearly decide to play it because the cards look good enough, the game seems soft enough, or they are bored enough. Every one of those three reasons is a sign that intuition is overriding framework, and out of position, even with marginal edges in hand quality, is a consistently losing proposition against players who think. Here is the concrete behavior. Before you look at your cards, note your position. Let position define your range before the cards do. Position determines what the cards are worth, not the other way around. The sixth behavior is avoiding emotional shortcuts. This is where the psychology gets precise. Emotional shortcuts are decisions made to relieve emotional discomfort rather than to maximize expected value. They are everywhere at poker tables. The call made not because calling is correct, but because folding feels like losing. The fold made not because folding is correct, but because calling risks more pain. The bluff fired not because the situation calls for it, but because the player needs to do something to reclaim the sense of control the last bad beat took from them. These shortcuts feel like decisions. They have the structure of decisions. You consider, you weigh, you act. But the outcome was already determined before the consideration began. The emotional state needed a specific action, and the analytical mind was recruited to justify it, not evaluate it. Now pay attention here, because this is where most players lose significant money without ever seeing it. Catching emotional shortcuts in real time requires one specific skill: identifying the emotion before you act. Not after. Not during the justification phase. Before. Develop the habit of asking, before any significant decision, what am I feeling right now? If the honest answer is frustrated, scared, bored, or angry, that is diagnostic information. It tells you the emotional system has already loaded a preferred action. It does not mean that action is correct. The behavior. When you identify an emotion before a decision, enforce a 5-second pause. In that pause, ask one question. If I had no emotional history with this session, what would I do? The answer to that question is almost always the correct play. Emotions are information about your state. They are not instructions about your action. Connor's the seventh behavior is seeing patterns over time. This is different from reading hands in the moment. It is a longer, slower, more powerful form of intelligence that almost no recreational player develops deliberately. Here is what it actually means at a poker table. It means tracking, across multiple orbits and multiple sessions, what specific players do in specific situations. Not just hand strength tells, behavioral tells. Does this player always bet large when scared? Does this player consistently overprotect draws? Does this player 3-bet light in the early levels and tighten up as the session progresses? Does this player show something different physically when holding strong hands? These patterns are only visible to the player who is actively watching when they have no stake in the current hand. The player who is mentally absent when they fold pre-flop, checking their phone, drifting, half present, is collecting zero data in the moments when data collection is completely free. And the player who has been collecting data across 30 hands knows things when a significant decision arrives that the hand-by-hand analyst simply cannot access. The behavioral practice is structured attention in dead hands. Every hand you fold pre-flop is a free observation window. Use it. Pick one player. Watch how they play the hand, not the outcome, the process. How they handle chips when strong, how they breathe when bluffing, how their sizing correlates to hand strength across multiple instances. This data is available to everyone at the table. Almost nobody collects it deliberately. The cards tell you what happened. The patterns tell you who the person is. The eighth behavior is accepting uncertainty, genuinely, not as a platitude, as a practiced cognitive state. Here is the problem. Uncertainty at a poker table feels like a problem to be solved. There is a correct answer. What does this player have? Is this bluff good? Should I call? And your job is to find it. Because finding it feels like the goal, not finding it feels like failure. And that discomfort drives players toward premature certainty. They decide what they think is happening, and then they stop updating. The discomfort has been resolved by choosing a belief, and now that belief gets defended against incoming evidence rather than updated by it. This is how good players make bad calls on rivers. They decided on the turn what their read was. By the river, that decision has hardened into certainty. The river card that should update the probability distribution instead gets filtered through the lens of the existing belief. They call, and they show down losing to a hand they would have folded against if they had stayed genuinely uncertain. Genuine acceptance of uncertainty is behavioral. It means holding your current read as a probability, not a fact. It means every new piece of information, a bet, a timing tell, a size change, a posture shift, actively updates the distribution rather than confirming it. It means being comfortable saying, in the middle of a hand, I genuinely do not know what this person has, and using that uncertainty as the actual input to a decision. The player who is comfortable not knowing makes better decisions under uncertainty than the player who manufactures false certainty to manage discomfort. Every single time. The ninth behavior is playing for EV, not for ego. And this is where the psychology becomes genuinely confrontational. Ego at the poker table is expensive. Not because it makes you feel bad, but because it makes you optimize for the wrong thing. The player running on ego is optimizing to feel smart, to feel respected, to not be shown up, to prove they were right. These are real motivations driving real decisions, and none of them are correlated with maximizing expected value. The clearest manifestation is the hero call. The call made on the river with a hand that probably cannot beat a value bet. Made because the player cannot stand the idea of being bluffed, because folding feels like losing, because the ego needs resolution more than the bankroll needs protection. The hero call is not strategic, it is emotional. It is the ego announcing it would rather lose a large pot than sit with the discomfort of an unanswered question. Here is the behavioral correction. When you feel the urge to make a call your analysis does not support, ask yourself one question. Am I calling because the math supports it, or because I need to be right? If the honest answer is the latter, fold, not because folding is always correct. Because a fold made in service of your actual analysis is worth more in long-term EV than a call made in service of your ego. Regardless of what the cards show, the ego wants to be right now. Expected value compounds over time. These are not the same optimization problem, and the player who conflates them will fund the players who do not. The 10th behavior is observing before acting. It operates at two levels, the first 20 minutes of a session and the 5 seconds before any significant decision. Both matter. Most players arrive at a poker table and immediately start playing. They post their blind, look at their cards, start making decisions, before collecting any information about the environment they just entered. Who plays fast? Who plays slow? Who is on tilt? Who is overconfident from running good? The table has a specific dynamic. It cannot be read from seat assignments. It can only be read from observation. And observation requires the willingness to sacrifice early action in exchange for information that makes every subsequent decision better. The same principle applies at the micro level. Before acting on any significant pot, observe the full picture, not just cards and board. The opponent's posture, their betting tempo, whether their behavior in this hand is consistent with similar hands earlier, whether anything about this moment feels different from the baseline you have established for this player. This observation takes seconds. It is almost never done deliberately, and it frequently surfaces information that changes the correct decision. The behavior. Enforced pause plus active scan. Before acting on anything important, pause and run a rapid inventory. What do I see that I have not yet integrated? What is my opponent doing that I have noticed, but not processed? What about this hand, right now, is different from what I expected? Observation is free information. Most players leave it uncollected. The 11th behavior is building mental discipline. And this is the one that makes every other behavior possible. Here is the truth about the 10 behaviors that came before this one. You understood all of them. You recognized yourself in them. You felt the discomfort of seeing your own patterns described with precision. And unless you develop this 11th behavior, you will play your next session in almost exactly the same way you played the last one. Because understanding what to do is not the same as doing it. The gap between understanding and execution is the gap mental discipline fills. And mental discipline is not willpower. It is not white-knuckled determination to force yourself to behave differently under pressure. Willpower fails under pressure. It is too expensive to maintain when the emotional systems are activated and the rational systems are under load. Mental discipline is architecture. It is the deliberate construction of habits, rituals, and frameworks that produce correct behaviors automatically, before the emotional systems have an opportunity to override them. It is the pre-session routine that puts you in the right state before you sit down. It is the between-hand habit of resetting your emotional baseline after significant events. It is the post-session practice of reviewing your decisions against the quality of your process, not the quality of your results. This architecture is built over time, not installed in a session. But every session is an opportunity to add one layer, to practice one of the 10 behaviors with more deliberateness than you did before, to catch one emotional shortcut you would previously have rationalized, to hold one probability distribution one moment longer than the false certainty would have. Poker does not reward the most intelligent player. It rewards the most disciplined. The most disciplined player at any table is not the one with the most knowledge. It is the one who has built a system robust enough that their knowledge survives the pressure that destroys everyone else's. Build the system. Leave a comment right now. Tell me which of these 11 behaviors you struggle with most. Not generically. Specifically, the pattern you recognized most clearly in your own play. I read every comment. The conversation continues there. Like this video if it gave you something real. Subscribe to Mind of a Grinder if you want to keep going at this level. The complete system, 10 books, the full behavioral architecture behind everything in this video is in the pinned comment at this week's launch price. The window is closing. You did not just learn something here, you leveled up. Now go play like it.